The transport ship's engines hummed their final note as massive docking clamps secured the vessel to Meridian, Academy's main port. Alex Reed pressed against the small window and stared at the impossible structure before them. The Academy rose from the surface of Avalon Moon like a crystal mountain, its translucent towers catching and splitting the light from 3 different suns. Streams of colored energy flowed between the spires, carrying information and resources throughout the vast, complex. Alex had seen pictures, but nothing had prepared them for the reality. Each tower stretched kilometers into the thin atmosphere, connected by graceful bridges that seemed too delicate to support their own weight. Moving platforms carried students between levels, their alien forms clearly visible even from this distance. The human felt their stomach twist with nervous energy. The other passengers began gathering their belongings. Alex watched a group of Ultron students floating past the window, their elongated heads pulsing with soft blue light as they communicated through direct neural connection. Each Ultron possessed 4 brains working in perfect harmony, making them natural intellectuals and philosophers. They moved with the confident grace of beings who had never questioned their place in the universe. A heavy footstep shook the deck. Alex turned to see 3 Bruton warriors gathering their ceremonial weapons from the cargo hold. Each stood nearly 3 meters tall, their chitinous armor gleaming under the artificial lights. The lead Bruton, whose carapace bore intricate scarring, noticed Alex staring and let out a sound somewhere between a growl and laughter. His companions joined in, their mandibles clicking in amusement. The human looked away quickly and checked their belongings one final time. Everything they owned fit into a single bag, a pathetic contrast to the elaborate trunks and equipment cases the other students carried. Alex had spent 3 years preparing for this opportunity, learning basic galactic standard and studying what little information Earth possessed about other species. It still felt woefully inadequate. A soft chime indicated the airlock was ready. Alex joined the line of disembarking passengers, trying to ignore the curious stares and whispered comments. Most had never seen a human in person. Earth had achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago, making humanity the newest and least advanced member of the Galactic Confederation. The Academy's receiving hall overwhelmed Alex's senses. The ceiling rose impossibly high, filled with floating displays showing information in dozens of languages and symbol systems. Students from across known space moved through the vast chamber, creating a living tapestry of colors, shapes, and forms. Some walked on multiple legs, others floated through the air, and a few existed as organized energy patterns that shifted between states of matter. Alex approached the registration console, operated by a being that resembled a tree with crystalline branches. The creature's surface flickered with bioluminescent patterns as it processed information from multiple students simultaneously. Name and species, the being requested in perfect galactic standard. Alex Reed, human, Alex replied, their voice sounding small in the enormous space. The creature's patterns shifted to what might have been surprise. Several nearby students stopped their conversations and turned to stare. Alex felt heat rising in their cheeks but kept their expression neutral. "Ah, yes, the human," the being said, its tone carrying subtle notes of curiosity and perhaps pity. "You are assigned to Residential Tower 7, Level 15, Room 847. Your academic advisor will contact you within the standard day cycle." The creature extended a crystalline branch holding a small device. "This will translate languages, provide navigation assistance, and connect you to the Academy network. Try not to lose it. Replacement costs are charged to your homeworld's account." Alex took the device, noting how the creature's branch recoiled slightly from the contact. The human clipped the translator to their ear and immediately heard the background conversations around them shift into understandable words. "Look at how small it is," someone was saying in what the translator identified as Bruton battle speech. "I heard they only live for 100 cycles," another voice added in ethereal harmonic. "Barely long enough to learn basic mathematics." "My clutch siblings studied their homeworld," came a third voice in chittering insectoid common. "They still use chemical combustion for local transport. Absolutely primitive." Alex pretended not to hear and followed the navigation arrows projected by their device. The path led through corridors lined with displays showing the Academy's 3th-century history. Alex paused at a holographic timeline that showed the great achievements of various graduating classes. The Alterans had produced most of the Confederation's greatest philosophers and scientists. The Brutans dominated military leadership positions. The Ethereals had revolutionized art and communication. Dozens of other species had contributed advances in their areas of specialization. Nowhere in the timeline was there any mention of humanity or its potential contributions. The residential tower proved to be another architectural marvel. Alex's room was small but comfortable, with a window offering a spectacular view of the Academy's central courtyard. The human unpacked their few belongings and activated the room's information system. The first message waiting was from their academic advisor, a professor named Hest. The Alteron's four-eyed face appeared on the screen, his expression conveying polite disinterest. "Student Reed," Professor Hest began, "I have reviewed your preliminary assessment scores and your species' educational background. While I admire the Confederation's commitment to inclusivity, I must be frank about your prospects here. Meridian Academy maintains the highest academic standards in known space. Many of our courses assume intellectual capabilities that may exceed human limitations." The professor paused, perhaps expecting Alex to respond, but the human remained silent. "I have arranged a modified curriculum that should be more appropriate for your cognitive level," Hess continued. "Basic galactic history instead of advanced temporal studies, elementary mathematics rather than multidimensional calculus, and introduction to diplomacy in place of strategic psychology. Even with these accommodations, you will need to work considerably harder than your classmates to achieve passing grades." The message ended with a schedule of classes and a reminder that academic probation began after the first failed examination. Alex stared at the blank screen for several minutes. Through the window, they could see groups of students socializing in the courtyard below. Alterans floated in geometric patterns, sharing thoughts at the speed of light. Brutans engaged in ritual combat practice, their movements precise despite their size. Ethereals created shifting patterns of color and light that served as both art and conversation. The human had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining themselves learning alongside the galaxy's brightest minds. The reality was isolation, condescension, and expectations so low they barely qualified as expectations at all. Alex pulled up the class schedule and began studying the course descriptions. Tomorrow would bring their first lectures, their first chance to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The professors expected failure, the students expected entertainment, and the galaxy expected confirmation that humans were exactly as primitive as they appeared. Perhaps it was time to surprise them all. The alarm klaxon echoed through the combat simulation chamber as Alex's team prepared for what everyone expected to be a spectacular failure. 3 months of constant mockery and poor grades had established the human as the Academy's most incompetent student. Now, paired with equally problematic teammates, Alex faced the semester's most challenging exercise. The scenario was deceptively simple. Pirates had seized the research station Omega-7 and taken its crew hostage. Student teams had 72 hours to plan and execute a rescue mission using standard Confederation equipment. The simulation had run for 15 years, and the best teams managed to save perhaps half the hostages before the pirates' automated defenses overwhelmed them. Drix floated beside the tactical display, his 4 eyes glowing with barely contained irritation. The Alteron was brilliant, achieving perfect scores in theoretical subjects, but his arrogance made him insufferable as a teammate. He had already made it clear that being paired with a human was beneath his intellectual dignity. Grax stood motionless in the corner, his massive frame radiating disapproval. The Brutan warrior considered simulation exercises a waste of time compared to real combat. His scarred carapace told stories of actual battles, making him one of the Academy's most feared students in physical confrontations. Vel crouched near the equipment lockers, her insectoid form trembling with nervous energy. Her species were known for their analytical minds, but Vel's anxiety made her freeze under pressure. The other students called her the calculator that crashes. "This is pointless," Drix announced, his neural crown flickering with agitation. "The scenario is mathematically unsolvable given our resources and time constraints. The simulation's designers created an exercise in acceptable losses, not actual rescue." Grak clicked his mandibles in agreement. Real warriors would storm the station directly. All this planning is weakness. Vel said nothing. Her compound eyes fixed on the floor. Alex studied the tactical display showing Omega 7's layout. Previous teams had tried everything obvious. Direct assault failed because the pirates had superior firepower and defensive positions. Stealth infiltration failed because the station's sensors detected any approaching craft. Negotiation failed because the pirates executed hostages at the first sign of outside interference, but something bothered Alex about the scenario. In the past 3 months, the human had learned to notice things that others missed, not through superior intellect, but through pure stubborn observation. Every simulation at the Academy followed certain patterns, reflecting the psychology of their creators. "Show me the previous attempts," Alex said quietly. Drix's eyes flashed with annoyance. "I have analyzed every tactical approach. The mathematics are clear, not the tactics," Alex replied. The pirates' responses. The display shifted to show recordings of past simulation runs. Alex watched team after team make their attempts, noting not the students' strategies but the pirates' reactions. Each time approaching ships appeared on sensors, the pirates immediately began executing hostages. When teams tried to jam communications, the pirates switched to backup systems. When students attempted deception, the pirates saw through every trick, but the pirates' responses weren't random. They followed patterns, and patterns revealed psychology. "They're afraid," Alex said suddenly. Drix rotated to face the human. "Explain." "Look at their behavior. They don't execute hostages because they're cruel. They do it because they're terrified of being caught. Every response is defensive, designed to make attackers back down." Alex highlighted specific moments in the recordings. When that Alteron team broadcast surrender, the pirates stopped killing for almost an hour. When the Bruton squad retreated, the pirates actually released 2 hostages as a show of good faith. Vel looked up from the floor, her antennae twitching with interest. "The simulation designers didn't create rational pirates," Alex continued. "They created frightened people who happen to be pirates. And frightened people make predictable mistakes." Grak rumbled with something that might have been curiosity. "What kind of mistakes?" Alex pointed to the station's waste disposal system. "They sealed every important entrance but ignored maintenance access." "Why? Because they're thinking like cornered animals, not strategic defenders?" "They secured what felt important, not what actually mattered." Drix's crown pulsed rapidly as he processed this information. "You're suggesting we approach through the sewage systems?" "I'm suggesting we approach like people they don't fear," Alex replied. "What if we don't sneak in at all? What if we walk through the front door?" The human activated the communication system and began crafting a message to the pirates. Instead of demands or threats, Alex sent what appeared to be a panicked transmission from a damaged freighter. "Please, we don't want trouble," Alex spoke into the recorder, injecting genuine fear into their voice. "Our ship is dying and we need emergency docking. We'll pay whatever you want, just please don't shoot." Vel's compound eyes widened. "You're pretending to be victims." "Better than that," Alex said, launching the message toward the station. "I'm pretending to be the kind of victims they want to help them escape." The plan that followed was unlike anything attempted before. Instead of attacking the station, Alex's team approached as refugees seeking passage off-world. They offered the pirates their ship in exchange for safe harbor, playing into the criminals' desire to flee rather than fight. The pirates, seeing easy prey rather than a threat, allowed the ship to dock. Once aboard, Alex's team didn't fight their way to the hostages. Instead, they convinced the pirates that Confederation forces were approaching and offered to help evacuate everyone, hostages included, to avoid bloodshed. Drix played the role of a nervous merchant, using his natural arrogance to seem like someone desperate to preserve his wealth. Grak pretended to be a bodyguard concerned only with his employer's safety. Vel's anxiety actually helped her portray a terrified passenger. The pirates, faced with what appeared to be fellow criminals and innocent bystanders, began making the kind of mistakes that frightened people always make. They dropped their guard. They trusted too quickly. They focused on escape rather than maintaining control. When the simulation ended, every hostage was safe. The pirates were captured alive. The rescue operation had succeeded without a single casualty. The simulation chamber fell silent as the results appeared on the main display. Perfect score. 0 failures. Complete mission success. Professor Hest's voice echoed through the chamber's speakers. Please remain in position while we verify these results. Drix stared at the display, his 4 eyes cycling through different spectrums as if the numbers might change. This is impossible. No team has ever achieved these parameters. Grak's mandibles clicked slowly. How did you know they would react that way? Alex looked at their teammates, seeing something new in their expressions. Not mockery or dismissal, but genuine curiosity. I watched them, Alex said simply. Not their tactics, or their weapons, or their defenses. I watched them. Frightened people always make the same choices, no matter what species they are. The chamber doors opened and Professor Hest entered, accompanied by 2 other faculty members. His neural crown was dark, suggesting deep concentration or confusion. Student Reed, he said carefully, please explain how you achieved these results. Alex looked around the chamber, noticing how the other students and faculty members were. STARNG? For 3 months, everyone had treated the human as an amusing curiosity, a primitive creature struggling with concepts beyond its understanding. Now they were all waiting for an explanation that none of them had thought to seek. I didn't solve the tactical problem, Alex said finally. I solved the people who created the tactical problem. Professor Hest's crown flickered once. Elaborate. Every species here is better than humans at something specific. You're smarter, stronger, faster, or have abilities we can't imagine. But you're all so focused on being superior that you forget to pay attention to what everyone else is actually doing. The human gestured toward the simulation display. Those pirates weren't a tactical challenge. They were people acting like people do when they're scared. Once I understood that, everything else was just theater. The chamber remained silent for several long moments. Then Professor Hest spoke, his voice carrying a note Alex had never heard before: uncertainty. The diplomatic simulation chamber buzzed with tension as 4 different species prepared for the most complex negotiation of the semester. Trade routes through the Nexus system had become a flashpoint, with each faction claiming exclusive rights based on historical precedent, economic necessity, military strength, and cultural significance. Alex sat at the human delegation table, still adjusting to the strange reality of being taken seriously. Word of the pirate station success had spread through the academy like wildfire, creating a new dynamic in every classroom. Students who had previously ignored the human now watched with curious eyes, waiting to see if the victory was luck or something more significant. The Alteron delegation occupied the chamber's center, their 4 representatives connected in a neural network that allowed instantaneous consultation. Their leader, a professor named Keth, had negotiated actual trade agreements for the Confederation. His presence indicated how seriously the faculty took this exercise. The Bruton team sat in formation, their ceremonial armor polished to mirror brightness. They represented military transport interests, claiming that their warrior fleets had the right to priority passage through any system. Their spokesperson, a battle-scarred veteran called Thane, had fought in 3 different wars. The ethereal delegation existed as shifting patterns of colored light, their forms dancing in complex geometries that served as both communication and artistic expression. They claimed the Nexus system as a site of spiritual significance, their ancestors having used it for meditation journeys across the galaxy. Finally, the insectoid hive mind maintained perfect synchronization, their 100 representatives moving and speaking as one entity. They argued that their merchant fleets required guaranteed access to maintain the economic stability that benefited all species. Alex studied each group carefully, noting not their stated positions but their body language, their interaction patterns, and the subtle tells that revealed their true concerns. 3 weeks of similar observations in other classes had begun revealing a disturbing pattern. Every species approached problems through the lens of their greatest strength, which inevitably became their greatest blind spot. The negotiation began with formal position statements. The Alterans presented a detailed mathematical analysis proving their intellectual property rights. The Brutans delivered a stirring speech about honor and the warrior's code. The Ethereals created a beautiful light display representing their spiritual connection to the system. The Insectoids provided economic data showing the dire consequences of restricted trade. Each presentation was masterful, showcasing centuries of specialized development. Each was also completely ineffective at addressing what the other delegations actually cared about. Alex waited until all formal statements concluded before speaking. "Before we discuss trade routes," the human said, "quietly, I have a question for each delegation. Not about your rights or claims, but about your fears." The chamber fell silent. Professor Hest, observing from the faculty section, leaned forward with interest. "Keth," Alex addressed the Alteran leader, "your mathematical analysis is perfect. But you're terrified that other species see Alterans as arrogant intellectuals who don't understand practical needs. You've calculated every variable except whether anyone will actually respect your conclusions." The Alteran's neural crown flickered with surprise, but he said nothing. Alex turned to the Bruton delegation. "Thane, you speak of honor and warrior traditions, but you're afraid that in a galaxy moving toward commerce and diplomacy, warriors are becoming obsolete. You need this trade route to prove that military strength still matters." Thane's mandibles clicked once, a sign of acknowledgement. In Bruton culture, the ethereal delegation fears that younger generations of their species are abandoning spiritual practices for material concerns. This isn't really about the Nexus system's significance. It's about preserving their cultural identity. The ethereal form shifted to deeper purples, indicating contemplation. And the hive mind delegation is afraid that other species will unite against them economically. You've built your entire civilization on trade networks, and losing access to key systems could trigger a cascade failure that destroys your economy. The insectoid representatives remained motionless, but their antennae twitched in ways that suggested internal discussion. Alex stood and activated the chamber's holographic display. "Everyone in this room is arguing about trade routes, but nobody is talking about what they actually want. You're all trying to solve different problems while pretending to negotiate the same agreement." The human highlighted different sections of the Nexus system on the display. "The Alterans want intellectual recognition. Fine. We establish research stations throughout the system and put Alteran scientists in charge of all data collection. Every ship that passes through contributes to a massive ongoing study of spacetime phenomena." Keth's eyes began glowing with interest. "The Brutans want military relevance. The research stations need protection from pirates and system hazards. Bruton fleets get exclusive security contracts, making them essential rather than obsolete." Thane straightened in his armor. "The Ethereals want cultural preservation. We designate specific transit times for spiritual journeys, creating scheduled periods when the system is reserved for meditation and reflection. Commercial traffic works around the sacred schedules." The ethereal forms shifted to brighter, more hopeful colors. "The insectoids want economic stability. Instead of competing for the same routes, different species get guaranteed access at different times and for different purposes. No one gets everything, but everyone gets something they can count on." Alex deactivated the display and looked around the chamber. The solution isn't giving anyone what they're asking for. It's giving everyone what they're actually afraid of. Losing. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Keth spoke. "How did you identify our underlying concerns so quickly?" "I watched you," Alex replied. not your presentations or your data or your formal positions. I watched how you behaved when you thought no one was paying attention. Keth, you recalculated your mathematics 3 times, even though the numbers were perfect. That's not intellectual. Rigor, that's anxiety about being wrong. Thane, you adjusted your armor every time someone mentioned economic factors like you were preparing for combat. The ethereals dimmed whenever anyone discussed practical applications, and the insectoids synchronized their movements more tightly when they felt threatened. Professor Hest rose from his observation seat. Student Reed, are you suggesting that successful negotiation requires psychological analysis of the participants? I'm suggesting that every species negotiates like they fight, Alex answered. Ulterans try to overwhelm opposition with superior logic. Brutans use intimidation and displays of strength. Ethereals seek harmony and consensus. Insectoids coordinate perfectly but struggle when forced to act independently. Everyone uses their greatest strength, which means everyone also reveals their greatest weakness. The human gestured toward the other delegations. The real negotiation isn't about trade routes. It's about convincing each species that they can get what they need without giving up what makes them who they are. Thane stood slowly, his massive frame imposing even in the academic setting. You speak of understanding warriors. Have you ever fought in actual combat? Alex met the Bruton's gaze steadily. No, but I've watched people fight for things they care about. Physical combat is just one type of conflict. Every interaction is a kind of battle, whether it's academic, diplomatic, economic, or social. The weapons change, but the psychology remains the same. The ethereal delegation suddenly flared bright gold, a color that indicated profound realization. Their spokesperson's voice resonated through the chamber's translation system. The human sees the pattern beneath the patterns, they said in their musical language. They observe not what we do, but why we do it. Keth's neural crown pulsed rapidly as he processed this information. This suggests that human intelligence is not quantitative but qualitative. Not processing more information but processing information. Differently, Alex nodded. Every species here has evolved to excel at specific challenges. You've become incredibly efficient at certain types of thinking. But efficiency requires specialization, and specialization creates blind spots. The human looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and optical sensors of each delegation. Humans never specialize because our homeworld never let us. We had to adapt to everything, which meant we had to understand everything. We're not better at any particular type of thinking, but we're decent at all types of thinking. Professor. Hest's voice cut through the chamber's contemplative silence. Student Reed, please report to my office after this session concludes. As the delegations began drafting their agreement based on Alex's framework, the human noticed something that sent a chill down their spine. Every species in the chamber was now watching them with a new expression, not curiosity, not amusement, fear. They had seen a human solve problems that their superior intellects, ancient wisdom, and specialized abilities couldn't touch. They had watched a primitive newcomer identify psychological patterns that their advanced civilizations had never noticed. And they were beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't any single capability. It was the ability to understand everyone else's, the Academy Championships, transformed Meridian's central complex into a festival of competitive excellence. For 1 week each year, students from across the galaxy gathered to prove their species' superiority in dozens of different disciplines. Ancient banners hung from the crystal towers, each representing centuries of academic tradition and species pride. Alex walked through the competitor preparation areas, observing the elaborate rituals each group performed before their events. Ultron teams floated in perfect geometric formations, their neural crowns synchronized as they shared knowledge at light speed. Bruton warriors performed ceremonial combat dances, their movements precise enough to shatter stone. Ethereal contestants created magnificent, light displays that served as both warm-up exercises and artistic expression. The human carried a simple data pad, containing notes about every major competitor, not their academic records or physical capabilities. but observations about their personalities, their fears, their motivations, and their relationships with teammates. 3 months of careful study had revealed that the championships weren't really about individual excellence. They were about each species trying to prove their cosmic significance through student achievement. Vel approached nervously, her insectoid form trembling with excitement. Since the diplomatic simulation, she had become something resembling a friend, though her species struggled with individual relationships outside the hive mind structure. "The betting pools have you ranked dead last in every category," she said, her compound eyes reflecting concern. "Some students are wagering on whether you'll finish any event at all." Alex smiled grimly. "What are the odds on overall championship placement?" 5,000 to 1 against placing in the top 10, Vel replied. "The faculty considers it a statistical impossibility." The human's datapad chimed with an incoming message from Professor Hest. The Alteron had become increasingly interested in Alex's methods, though his tone remained professionally skeptical. "Student Reed," the message began, "I have reviewed your event registrations with considerable concern. You have entered competitions in strategic planning, diplomatic negotiation, resource management, crisis response, and psychological analysis. This represents more categories than most students attempt in their entire academic career. I strongly advise focusing on 1 or 2 areas where you might achieve marginal success." Alex deleted the message without responding and continued toward the registration center. The human had no intention of winning individual events through superior skill. The plan was far more ambitious and considerably more dangerous. The opening ceremony filled the Academy's largest amphitheater with representatives from dozens of worlds. The curator, an ancient being whose species had founded Meridian Academy, delivered the traditional address about excellence, competition, and the advancement of galactic civilization. "For 3 centuries," the curator intoned, its voice resonating through multiple dimensions, "these championships have demonstrated the unique contributions each species brings to our shared knowledge. May this year's competition continue that proud tradition." As the ceremony concluded, Alex noticed something the event organizers had missed. The seating arrangement placed natural rivals adjacent to each other. Traditional allies were separated by competitors, and the ceremony's scheduling forced certain species to choose between supporting their own teams and attending culturally important events. The human began implementing the first phase of what would become the most complex psychological manipulation in Academy history. During the strategic planning event, Alex didn't compete against the other participants. Instead, the human studied their decision-making processes and began feeding them information designed to trigger specific responses. A casual comment to the Alteron team about innovative approaches prompted them to abandon their proven strategies for untested theories. A suggestion to the Bruton team that their opponents were underestimating warrior capabilities led them to overcommit resources to displays of strength. Each intervention was subtle, appearing to be friendly conversation or innocent questions. But Alex was systematically exploiting each species' psychological tendencies, turning their greatest strengths into strategic weaknesses. The resource management competition became an exercise in alliance building. Alex convinced natural enemies to cooperate by framing their mutual rivals as greater threats. The human identified which teams were struggling with specific challenges and offered assistance that created debt relationships. Within hours, Alex had assembled a network of obligations and dependencies that spanned multiple species. During the crisis response scenario, Alex didn't try to solve the presented emergency faster than other teams. Instead, the human created additional crises that only certain teams could handle, then positioned themselves as the coordinator who made those solutions possible. Every species got to demonstrate their unique capabilities while Alex orchestrated the overall response. The psychological analysis event should have been impossible for a human to win. The scenario involved evaluating the mental states of multiple species under stress, requiring knowledge of alien psychology that humans theoretically lacked. But Alex had spent months studying the Academy's students, not as academic subjects but as individuals with hopes, fears, and behavioral patterns. The Humans' analysis wasn't based on textbook knowledge of species psychology. It was based on direct observation of how each individual actually behaved when they thought no one was watching. By the championship's fourth day, something unprecedented was happening. The traditional competitive dynamics had shifted entirely. Instead of species competing against each other, teams were working together in combinations that had never occurred before. Ultrons were seeking advice from Brutons. Ethereals were coordinating with insectoids. Natural enemies were functioning as allies. And at the center of every alliance, every cooperation, every successful collaboration was Alex Red, the faculty. Watched in growing alarm as their carefully structured competition transformed into something unrecognizable. Species that had maintained separate identities for millions of years were suddenly finding common ground. Students who had never spoken to each other were working together with remarkable efficiency. Professor Hest confronted Alex directly during the dinner break between events. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his neural crown flickering with agitation. "This is not competition. This is manipulation." Alex looked around the dining hall, where mixed-species groups sat together for the first time in Academy history. "I'm helping everyone get what they actually want." "Which is what, exactly?" "Recognition," Alex replied simply. "Every species here wants to prove they're valuable, that they contribute something unique to galactic civilization. But you can't prove value by defeating each other. You can only prove it by working together to achieve things that none of you could accomplish alone." Hest's 4 eyes cycled through different spectrums as he processed this information. "You have turned the championships into a social experiment." "I've turned the championships into what they should have been from the beginning," Alex corrected. "A demonstration of how different types of excellence can combine to create something greater than the sum of its parts." The final day brought the individual excellence competitions, where students demonstrated their species' peak capabilities in isolation. Alex didn't enter these events, instead spending the time observing how each victory was received by the mixed-species audience that had formed over the previous days when the Alteran champion solved a mathematical proof that had puzzled scholars. For decades, the Bruton section cheered as loudly as the Alterans. When a Bruton warrior achieved a perfect combat score, the Ethereals created a light display in celebration. Each species' achievement had become a source of pride for everyone present. The closing ceremony should have been a traditional ranking of species performance. Instead, the curator found himself addressing an audience that had fundamentally changed during the week of competition. "The results of this year's championships," the curator announced, "are unprecedented in Academy history. For the first time, we cannot declare a single species victorious because the competition itself has evolved beyond species-based categories." The ancient being's gaze fell on Alex, sitting quietly in the mixed-species section that had spontaneously formed. "Student Reed," the curator continued, "you have achieved something remarkable. Not victory in any single category, but transformation of the entire competitive framework. You have demonstrated that the greatest intelligence is not the ability to excel at specific tasks, but the ability to help others excel at tasks you cannot perform yourself." As the ceremony concluded and students began returning to their regular routines, Alex noticed that the academy itself had changed. The rigid species separations in dining halls, study groups, and social activities had dissolved. Students who had seen each other as competitors or curiosities now interacted as colleagues and friends. The human had won the championships not by proving superiority, but by proving that the concept of superiority itself was the problem. And in the crystal towers of Meridian Academy, faculty members were beginning to realize that everything they thought they knew about intelligence, competition, and galactic civilization had just been quietly revolutionized by a supposedly primitive species that excelled at nothing except understanding everything. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation's Educational Council convened in the most secure chamber on Central Station, a massive space habitat that served as the government's administrative heart. Representatives from 47 different species filled the amphitheater, their various forms creating a living rainbow of galactic diversity. At the chamber's center, a single human sat at a simple table, surrounded by the galaxy's most powerful educational authorities. Alex had been summoned without explanation 3 days after the Academy Championships concluded. The journey from Meridian Academy to Central Station had taken place under what could only be described as protective custody. Though no one had explicitly stated what the human was being protected from, the council's speaker, an ancient ethereal, whose light patterns had dimmed with age, called the session to order. Her voice resonated through translation devices in dozens of languages simultaneously. This emergency session addresses unprecedented developments at Meridian Academy, she announced. Student Alex Reed, representing humanity, has demonstrated capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about intelligence, education, and species interaction. Council Member Keth will present the primary analysis. The Alteron professor rose from his delegation section, his neural crown pulsing with complex data streams. Alex recognized him from the diplomatic simulation, though. His demeanor had changed dramatically since their last encounter. Honored Council, Keth began, over the past 4 months, we have observed a human student systematically outperform individuals from species with demonstrably superior cognitive capabilities. This achievement occurred not through exceptional processing power, specialized abilities, or advanced knowledge, but through methods that our current educational models cannot adequately explain. The holographic display activated, showing recordings from Alex's various academic performances. Council members watched in silence as the human solved problems through behavioral analysis rather than direct computation, achieved diplomatic breakthroughs by understanding psychological motivations and transformed competitive structures by manipulating social dynamics. The implications are disturbing, Keth continued. If a supposedly primitive species can achieve these results, what does this suggest about our understanding of intelligence itself? A Bruton representative, her battle scars gleaming under the chamber's lights, stood to address the assembly. General Thane has submitted a military analysis of the human's capabilities. The conclusions are classified, but I can state that our strategic assessment protocols require immediate revision. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as species representatives began whispering among themselves. Alex sat quietly, observing the same behavioral patterns that had made the Academy so predictable. Fear, confusion, and territorial defensiveness were apparently universal constants. The insectoid collective speaker, a synchronized chorus of 100 voices, presented their economic projections. If human capabilities prove representative of their species, trade negotiations, resource allocation agreements, and territorial contracts may require fundamental restructuring. Our mathematical models assume rational actors with predictable decision-making patterns. Humans appear to operate outside these parameters. Alex finally spoke, their voice cutting through the growing chaos. May I address the Council's concerns? Directly, the speaker's light patterns shifted to cautious yellow. The floor recognizes Student Reed. Alex stood and activated the chamber's central display. You're all asking the wrong question. You want to know how humans achieved these results, but you should be asking why your own species didn't achieve them first. The chamber fell silent. Every species represented here has spent millions of years optimizing for specific environments and challenges, Alex continued. The Alterans developed multiple brains to process complex mathematics. The Brutons evolved natural armor and combat instincts. The Ethereals transcended physical form to explore pure thought. Each of you became the best possible version of what you needed to be. The human gestured toward the assembled representatives. But optimization requires sacrifice. You gave up flexibility for efficiency, adaptability for specialization, breadth for depth. You became incredibly good at specific things by becoming incapable of everything else. Professor Hest rose from the Alteron section. Are you suggesting that human cognitive inferiority is actually an advantage? I'm suggesting that what you call inferiority is actually generalization, Alex replied. Humans never had the luxury of specialization because our homeworld tried to kill us in every possible way. We survived ice ages, predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. We couldn't outrun everything, so we learned to predict everything. We couldn't overpower every threat, so we learned to understand every threat. The display showed images of Earth's diverse environments and the challenges that shaped human evolution. Frozen tundras, scorching deserts, dense forests, vast oceans, and countless predators that had forced humanity to develop not superior capabilities, but superior adaptability. Every problem you've presented me with has the same solution, Alex continued. Understand the individuals involved, predict their behavior based on their psychology, and guide them toward decisions that serve everyone's interests. You call this manipulation, but it's really just applied empathy. A crystalline being from the geometric collective projected mathematical formulas into the chamber's air. Your success rates exceed statistical probability. This suggests supernatural abilities or advanced technology. Alex laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise several species representatives. There's nothing supernatural about paying attention. I spent 4 months watching you all ignore each other while focusing on your own superiority. You're so busy being excellent at your specializations that you forget to notice what everyone else is actually doing. The human walked to the chamber's center, now addressing the entire assembly. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not intelligence or strength or technology. It's that we're the only species in the galaxy that evolved to understand other species instead of competing with them. The speaker's light patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound contemplation. Explain this distinction. Every species here achieved dominance on their homeworld by becoming better than their competition, Alex said. Humans achieve dominance by learning to cooperate with everything, including our competition. We domesticated wolves instead of hunting them to extinction. We learned to work with horses instead of avoiding them. We even learned to cultivate plants and bacteria to serve our needs. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives began grasping the implications. A species that had evolved to understand and manipulate other life forms would naturally excel at understanding and guiding other sapient species. The Confederation has operated for millennia on the assumption that different species require different approaches to diplomacy, trade, and cooperation, Alex continued. But you've all been approaching each other through the lens of your own psychology. Ulterans try to convince everyone through superior logic. Brutans rely on displays of strength. Ethereals seek emotional harmony. You're all speaking your own languages while pretending to speak galactic standard. The human activated a new display, showing interaction patterns between different species over the past century. Look at your diplomatic failures, your trade disputes, your military conflicts. Every problem stems from species trying to deal with others as if they were members of their own civilization. Keth's neural crown pulsed rapidly. You are suggesting that successful interspecies relations require not universal principles, but individualized psychological approaches. I'm suggesting that every species in this chamber has been trying to solve galactic problems using tools designed for species-specific challenges, Alex replied. It's like trying to perform surgery with a hammer or compose music with a sword. The tools are excellent, but they're being used for the wrong tasks. The Bruton representative clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. If your analysis is correct, it implies that human involvement in Confederation activities could improve outcomes across all sectors. Or, interrupted a nervous-looking being from the cautious collective, it could represent the end of species independence. If humans can predict and manipulate our behavior, what prevents them from controlling us entirely? The chamber filled with worried murmurs as representatives began considering the darker implications of human capabilities. Alex had anticipated this response and was ready with an answer that would either reassure the council or terrify them completely. You're right to be concerned, Alex said quietly. Humans could probably manipulate most of your species quite easily. We've been doing it unconsciously since we arrived at the academy, but here's what you're missing. The human looked around the chamber, meeting eyes and optical sensors with steady confidence. We don't want to control you. We want to understand you. There's a difference between manipulation for dominance and guidance for mutual benefit. Humans spent millions of years learning that cooperation produces better outcomes than conquest. The speaker's light patterns shifted to bright gold. Elaborate on this distinction. Predators eliminate their prey, Alex explained. Parasites weaken their hosts. But humans learn to improve the things we depend on. We made wolves into better hunters by turning them into dogs. We made wild plants into better food sources by turning them into crops. We even made our own societies better by learning to work with people who think differently than we do. The display showed humanity's history of domestication, agriculture, and social development. Not conquest and subjugation, but partnership and mutual improvement. If humans wanted to dominate the galaxy, we wouldn't do it through military force or economic pressure, Alex continued. We'd do it by making every species better at being themselves, then guiding you toward decisions that happen to align with human interests. And you'd thank us for it. The chamber fell completely silent as the implications sank in. But, Alex added with a slight smile, that would require humans to actually want galactic domination. Most of us are more interested in exploring new worlds, learning new things, and figuring out how to get along with our neighbors. We're much too curious about what you might accomplish on your own to interfere with your development. The emergency session continued for 6 more hours as representatives grappled with revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligence, cooperation, and the future of galactic civilization. When the final votes were tallied, the Council reached a unanimous decision that would reshape the Confederation's approach to education, diplomacy, and interspecies relations. Humanity would be invited to establish exchange programs with every member species. Human advisors would be embedded in diplomatic missions, trade negotiations, and conflict resolution efforts. Most significantly, the concept of intelligence itself would be redefined to include not just processing power or specialized abilities, but the capacity to understand and work with different types of thinking. As Alex prepared to return to Meridian Academy, now as humanity's first official representative to the Confederation's educational system, the human reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous predator wasn't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it was the one that made everyone else stronger and smarter too.